Well, hello. Hey there, Brian. How are you?
Hey, Andy, doing well. How have things been on your end?
Yeah, it's been really busy, and the sound check sounds good. I can hear you well. So,
Good.
a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the folks tuning in. We have with us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, Brian Quinlivan from Santiment. And this we're back for the seventh time this year, and we have quite a few things, very interesting developments that have happened since we were last on 30 days ago. So let's. I mean, look, what's happened in the last 30 days? Germany's been dumping their Bitcoin. Mt. Gox is set to release the Bitcoin to the people who have been very patiently waiting for it. Um, the Federal Reserve's been pretty ambiguous. They've taken a pretty ambiguous stance on interest rates. And the latest, I think 2 days ago, Larry Fink appeared on CNBC with Jim Cramer talking about Bitcoin. So and obviously the markets have been pretty interesting, pretty choppy. Let's I'll hand it over to you, Brian, to see what's been happening in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I mean, the big one is the Trump assassination attempt. I think that, in a lot of people's opinion, was what really sparked this rebound rally in the last few days, um, and might have single-handedly kind of changed the trajectory of what we were going to be seeing the next few months. And because of that, I think the nature of our call is going to be a lot different than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah. That was quite a shocker, and I think on social media, a lot of things are still cropping up. New video footages from different angles and different evidence being found. It's definitely a topic of discussion that's still ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I can share my screen and show a few pieces of kind of analytical evidence that we have behind that, because it's a big claim to say that a political event like that can change crypto, but we really saw precisely to the minute how things changed, and I'll show you guys here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so this was a post we put out 3 days ago, shortly after it happened. And the big thing we saw was a Bitcoin downturn. This was literally right at the time it occurred. It was around 3:10 to 3:13 p.m. Pacific time. It was on the East Coast, so 3 hours ahead of me. And you suddenly see Bitcoin do a little drop. Nothing too crazy or anything, but likely some bit of reaction was related to this event and people hearing that Trump had been shot, which is technically true. So people are wondering, is he okay? They're first hearing about it on social media. And then, images start to surface of him holding up his hand in triumph, letting people know he's okay, and appearing to mouth the words fight, right? Which went down pretty famously. And after that, we saw Bitcoin immediately take off like this. And if you don't believe it was related, you can see Trump coin down here, this green line, spiking obviously much more significantly in that same time span over the next hour or so. And you can see these blue and red lines here are the social frequency of the word Trump, which are going to be identical, of course. The only difference on these two charts would be this is Bitcoin and this is Trump coin. And obviously a speculative coin that is representative of the presidential candidate here in the US is going to have more volatility when it comes to direct Trump news. So long story short, this was the bottom right here, literally as the news was coming down. And we had this short drop, and then it absolutely took off to where it is now in the 64.5K range. It was up just a tad above 65K yesterday. So we've gone from people wondering about whether we're going to be hitting 50K and below soon to wondering how quickly 70K or above is going to happen. And I think the sentiment has just completely flipped on its head as a result of this event.
Yeah. Yeah, I think speaking of meme coins, I think someone else sent me besides the Trump coin, I think there was a MAGA coin,
Of
which
course.
which looked pretty similar to that trajectory.
Yeah, if we take a look at MAGA, which actually has the ticker Trump, not to be confused with the Trump coin, there was a little bit of a reaction, not quite on the same level. So if we go to a really granular view, we'll do a line chart, look at 5 minutes, give it just a moment to load here, and there we go. So the occurrence was very obvious here. I'm going to zoom in and just look at the past week or so. We'll actually just hide all of these for now so you can see the price on its own.
Yeah.
So July 13th, this was as it went down, and we see this huge spike, actually extremely similar. And it actually got all the way up to about a 63% spike over the next few hours or so before naturally it's going to decline as crypto markets are uncertain and the overreaction starts to even out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
So
it's
obviously
uncanny. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no,
it
I was just
really
saying
is.
how it. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that really reflects the speculative nature of crypto in a nutshell. We have many fundamental things that are positive for cryptocurrency and has helped to launch, Bitcoin to that March all-time high, and so many other market caps growing independently as a result of Bitcoin being able to carry the load. Um, but at the end of the day, especially meme coins, related to Trump, related to cute dogs, whatever, those are the ones where it's really the people who control the price more so than those huge, um, you know, massive. What's the word I'm looking for? I'll just leave it as huge whale addresses and key stakeholders that kind of carry the load and decide when Bitcoin and all of crypto is going down. But if Bitcoin is kind of in a range, that's where you'll see meme coins do their own thing. And especially after the Trump news, Bitcoin took off, and Trump and everything else kind of saw some profit redistribution over the past week.
yeah, yeah. And it's amazing how quickly how high a correlation there was to the event, and how quickly the market reacted.
100%. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
as we
yeah,
saw, and these are kind of the 30-day returns, but we can, of course, change to just the 7-day. And this was, the event happened 5 days ago. So give or take, this is a pretty good sample size of what that effect looked like. And you have plenty like XRP up 44% over the past week. Pretty impressive stuff. It's been kind of the talk of the town as of late. Near's gone off, Pepe, Internet Computers right up there with XRP. Arweave is another good one. Here's another meme coin, Whiff. So there are plenty of assets that have independently been able to decouple in the past 7 days, but 30 days gives a more interesting perspective, in my opinion, because it's much more of a mixed bag, where Bitcoin is actually still down about 1.8% since we last spoke last month, Andy.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's So what are your thoughts? Like, is do you think that, or does the rally look like it's gonna last, or do you think it's a knee-jerk reaction to the news?
It seems a bit knee-jerk to me. We were already starting to feel like the dip was getting a bit too aggressive at the beginning of the month. So
Mhm.
it's almost gone from kind of a um, overly aggressive downturn to a overly aggressive rebound. And the truth, as most markets are, lies somewhere in between. And that's where we can kind of look at the fundamentals. I was looking at the whales, as we often do on our calls, And
Yeah.
they still look pretty good here. When I check out the 10 plus addresses, essentially the sharks and whales, since late April, almost 3 months ago, these 10 plus wallets have accumulated about 44.5K more Bitcoin, which is a pretty good sign. I would like to see, make it a little bigger here. I'd like to see this line turn around at some point. This is kind of the sharks and whales tether holdings, and it's showing their buying power is continuing to decrease because obviously they're swapping a lot of their tether for Bitcoin, and ideally you need more of their fiat coming in to replenish that tether and keep the 100K to $10 million line moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
USD coin looking a little bit better, at least.
Yeah.
So besides that, I mean, Bitcoin supply and exchanges are staying down. That's a good sign. Tether and USD coin supply and exchanges are moving up, which is, it makes sense because a lot of buying has been had. Flat funding rate, so not much going on there. We made this insight earlier today. In fact, I'll just pull up the insights page. It's a better example. So this is the total amount of holders, basically non-empty wallets in Bitcoin over time. And there is a net drop of about 672.5K wallets compared to a month ago that held Bitcoin in them. Roughly 1.3% drop or so, not huge significant, but it is a long enough drop where it's the biggest we've seen in about 9 months or so, arguably 10, going back to late September to late October. That's the last time we saw something like this. And for those who remember what happened toward the end of October of 2023, that's when the big bull rally started, right? That's when we started to really see, I'll visualize it because that's easier than just explaining it. That's when we really started to see all of crypto take off. And crypto, of course, more than doubled since that time. You can see October 14th and 15th right around here. Prices were still at, looks like about 27K. Let me add on total amount of holders to it. So this is the last time we saw the line really go down and kind of stay down for a long period of time. And this is often a sign of capitulation. So look at it as kind of an inverse correlation where small traders are the ones making up most of these wallets. You're not seeing, hundreds of thousands of whale wallets out there. They don't even exist. There's only a few thousand that exist. So in order for this line to go down, it takes several 100,000 mini tiny wallets deciding to liquidate their assets. And that's what causes, a lower amount. And obviously, where does that money usually go when the small ones are liquidating? Well, the whales and sharks are scooping them up. And we saw here just a huge increase as FOMO kicked in when prices were rising. And then they finally dropped here, right, in early to mid-January. And then we see another drop in total amount of holders right here. Another, looks like 748,000 or so wallets liquidate. And finally, they stop fudding and decide to start accumulating again. We get that all-time high. And we really haven't seen a drop like this in total amount of holders since this drop, which was obviously a precursor to a pretty good time in crypto.
Yeah. And again, it's when you correlate the data like that, it's it seems so obvious, doesn't it, Brian? It looks so obvious. Yeah.
I mean, some are better than others. There are going to be exceptions where you see the total amount of holders going down, and sometimes even the tiny wallets get it right. A broken clock is right twice a day. But if you use probabilities on your side, you generally are going to do well if you do the opposite of what those small trader crowd representatives are doing, and you're going to do well if you follow what the whales and sharks are doing. So right now, it's still a pretty favorable picture, in my opinion.
So Brian, looking at this chart with the latest decline, right, in terms of number of wallet holders, it looks like a more gradual decline compared to the one back in September last year. Yeah,
True. Hmm.
yeah. That
But
was a
more
pretty sharp.
sustained. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. That's good, right? That's very good.
Yeah, I mean, it really means that the consensus for a little over a month now has been Bitcoin's going to go down. And they were
Yeah.
probably patting themselves on the back as it was going down up until the bottom hit in right around the, I guess I'd say July 7th or so. But even after this
Mm,
rebound, it's not like they've changed their tune. They're continuing to drop, kind of like they
yep.
were here. You can see Bitcoin's price is going up a little bit back here,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
they weren't convinced. And that is ultimately what allows mini rallies to become bull runs when prices start to go up and nobody's really FOMOing, or at least a small level of FOMO is happening compared to normal. So
Yeah,
there isn't much resistance, and whales and sharks can just push up prices without, you know, having to deal with much price punishment on the way up.
yeah. That's a very cool chart right there. Love it.
Yeah, I thought it would be interesting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously, when it comes to MVRV, because of this rally, we went from negative back here up to positive again. So it's a little more risky of a time for the short term, where average returns are up at around plus 6%. Long-term traders are up an average of about 17%. Ideally, we want to see them both below zero. We've talked about that plenty of times on previous calls.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, as of now, not too crazy of whale activity, but the activity that is happening is indicating that they're continuing to accumulate. And I'm seeing a lot more, strong signs than weak signs that Bitcoin can return to uh, close to those potential all-time high levels again.
Cool, cool. Could we is it possible for us to take a quick look at Ethereum? Because I know when it was going down, it dropped to as low as around the 2,800 mark, and
You
then
bet.
that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's enjoyed a little bit of a rebound. It was down in the 2700s just about
Mm,
10 days ago, and it rebounded as high as almost 3,500 or so. It could have briefly spiked over it. I'm not positive, but right now it's sitting
mhm.
at 34.23, which is, according to its point from its all-time high, it's down 15.7% from its all-time high,
Yep,
which means it's held up pretty well compared to a lot of altcoins out there that really fell off a cliff. Cardano is one that comes to mind.
yep, yep.
Address activity fairly normal at this time.
Mhm.
Circulation about the same. MVRV looks actually like a pretty similar picture to Bitcoin at the moment. Both short and long-term traders are a little bit above zero at the moment, meaning there's a tad more risk than usual. I
Mhm.
would note that the funding rate here, if I zoom in a little bit, there are some signs that that it's moving up. Let me see if I can pin the axis a little better here. Yeah, so this bright green area, this is the last day and a half or so on this is BitMEX, excuse me. So when we see spikes like this, it means that
Mhm.
there's a little bit of greed going on. So I get the impression, there's still some optimism about the impending ETFs being publicly released, and various bullish narratives forming, that's giving people enough comfortability to put their money where their mouth is right now with Ethereum.
It's interesting to note. Yeah.
So between Bitcoin and Ethereum, there might be a few yellow caution flags popping up for Ethereum. But of course, if
Mhm.
Bitcoin's able to take off, Ethereum is still going to follow and potentially outperform it due to the optimism and anxiousness people have about the ETFs. So, yeah, I think
Oh,
from a speculative perspective, there can be things working in Ethereum's favor. on-chain wise, Bitcoin looks like it has a small edge here.
Yep.
And supply and exchanges is moving up too on Ethereum, which is a bit of a concern. It's been moving up for quite some time, interestingly.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the exact opposite of Bitcoin. We were going straight down for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it's just rising monumentally.
Wow.
So this could be related to some DeFi wallets. It could simply be related to, some key staking or DeFi wallets that are now being attributed as exchange wallets instead of non-exchange. Who knows? But this looks like a pretty consistent rise. So I'm prone to believe that this would be something to be a tiny bit concerned about. And then RSI, it's just slightly above average right now. This is the 50.0 line. This is kind of where RSI rests on average. So anything above is a bit risky. Anything below is an opportunity. So congratulations if you bought in around the 4th of July. That was when the RSI was clearly showing we were bottoming out.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah,
so overall, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Social trend wise, we can look at some trending coins here. And we see that XRP is the one that's really getting the most hype right now. There's definitely a bullish narrative that's formed here. And you can see that retail investors in particular are really jumping in. I'm not going to read all of this for the interest of time, but it looks like this is kind of, for the XRP community, something that was a long time coming, and they're doing their best to keep the momentum going right now. I would just be weary of it getting into too bullish of a narrative, because that's where FOMO kicks in and local tops form. WorldCoin also up there. I know it's had some big days the last few. Couple other out there, Gods, Wild. We saw that Near was doing pretty well on our top 100 list. ONT, there's Ethereum, as ETFs are still the big topic of discussion. Stellar is up there, Tether, and Toncoin, which has been among the very best performers of 2024 thus far.
Oh yeah, definitely. Wow, that's a bit of a mixed bag, but very I guess leaning more towards bullishness than the other way.
Yeah, I mean, we're very recently starting to see a bit of a bounce, so naturally the crowd has become a bit more cautiously optimistic. Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, because we're still seeing kind of a tentativeness, as we saw with total amount of holders for Bitcoin. Like, people are still liquidating wallets more than creating new ones right now, which is a good sign, by the way. But we did this post yesterday.
Yeah. And
this kind of just looks at the sentiment for 4 key large caps: Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and Cardano. You can see people are very, very bearish toward Cardano after it's dropped 43% in the past 4 months. The price performance for XRP, meanwhile, hasn't stopped. It's still looking good. So the bullish calls and the optimism related to XRP are still very much prevalent throughout social media. And these 2 lines that are kind of in between, they're actually showing there's still a bit more bearish narrative for both Bitcoin and Ethereum compared to usual. So yes, we're seeing kind of more of a bullish bias on the social trends page, but you'll also notice that Bitcoin is not on this list. It was being talked about a lot after the bounce following the Trump news, but it's not among the ones that are seeing like this big bullish euphoric spike. And that's something that you should be aware of, as people are kind of distracted by altcoins for the time being.
Yep. Well, that I guess we're almost end of the this session for us. So what are any final thoughts, Brian, for the audience? What do you
Sure. I
think?
mean, keep in mind the correlation with the S&P as well. That's something that we might be updating on our social media soon. We definitely have seen, in fact, we were talking about the divergence at the beginning of July, where the S&P was continuing to just climb and climb and climb, while Bitcoin was struggling. And so this gap here, this growing gap, I guess I'll just do that to illustrate it. Or actually, this would be easier. So S&P like this, Bitcoin kind of like that. That's a bullish divergence for crypto if you believe that there's a correlation between the two sectors. And you probably should believe that, because that's been the trend for about 2.5 years, ever since the Fed started cutting interest rates, or I should say rising interest rates again in early 2022. So the fact that this was forming meant that something like that was probably going to be inevitable. And the S&P finally had kind of a really bad day earlier today on my end. It's the evening now, but market closed about 6 hours ago, and it actually dropped about 1.5%. But I would presume that Bitcoin and the S&P are still going to trade somewhat similarly for the time being, until some event really allows Bitcoin to break through once again. So think of Bitcoin a little like a leveraged tech stock right now, and understand that there's still going to be a little bit of mercy and reliance on the S&P 500 and equities for likely at least the rest of this year. I'd say the election at the end of the year might be an interesting time.
Oh yeah. It's always an interesting time during election year, and that's November, isn't it? Is that November?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
And the new president, whoever he is, ends up taking office in January.
Yeah.
Or I should say he or she, because there's a small probability that Kamala Harris runs as the Democratic candidate, if you know who that is. That was she's the current vice president for President Joe Biden. So there's a possibility of that, and a lot of different trajectories we can take in the next few months.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time between now and when we find out who the new president of the United States is going to be. And markets could potentially be very volatile in that period too.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind, people don't like to hear this, but at least according to the crowd, we've seen clear pro-crypto narratives coming when news comes out that Trump is more likely to be president. That doesn't mean you should believe that, or you should like one candidate more than the other. But investing is about not what you like necessarily, but what you know the crowd likes and what they are going to pump next. So whether you're a huge fan of Trump or not a huge fan of Trump, if you're understanding that the crypto community reacts more positively to any news that shows he could be president next, you can trade according to that until that narrative changes. And clearly, this event and the conclusion of it showed that a lot of people felt Trump came out on top of this and had a higher likelihood of being president as a result of surviving an assassination attempt. So it's a pretty meta discussion, but there's a lot of traders out there who have made a lot of money just from understanding how the crowd tends to react to pro-Trump or pro-Biden news, or anti-Trump or anti-Biden news. And it's only going to ramp up more and more over these next 4 months before the election.
And that's actually a very good point to end with, because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, Brian, it's not about what your personal preferences are. It's about being data driven in your analysis, and it's a perfect time for a plug, but that's exactly what Santiment is. It's all pure data. It's for you to interpret and to figure out what's happening, based to be data driven and not to be emotionally driven when making your decisions, whether to buy or to sell. Yeah. So
and I'll plug you right back and let everyone know that code EquitiesTracker, all one word in all caps, will get you 25% off of your first purchase, whether it's 1 month or a year or anything in between. I highly recommend you support Andy's great company and channel here if and when you would like to sign up for a Sandbase Pro account. You get 2 weeks free upon any sign up, so keep that in mind as well.
There you go. Yeah, this was a really, really good one, Brian. I am definitely looking forward to next month to see what develops in the next 4 weeks.
Thanks, my friend. Yeah, we will have a lot to catch up on, and I can't wait.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great one, and to the audience, thank you for tuning in and watching right to the very end. Have a good one, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.